Okay, so we are streaming and it's working. All right, so I'm gonna. And you're muted, just to let you know. But we're streaming now.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to episode number 2 of The Forge, Geeks Worldwide's main show covering technology, news, and all the things in that vein that interest us. I am your host, Agasicles Stamus, managing editor for Geeks Worldwide. Joining me here tonight is Mr. Kyle Johnson.
Heyo.
And backing us up as the technical director is Mr. Lance John.
Hey guys, what's up? How's everybody doing tonight?
Good. Hey, let's roll with it because I may fall victim to the flu bug, which is running around at any moment. So we got a lot of stuff to cover, but we're gonna push through it. So kicking off tonight, as always, I've shuffled the order of our primary topics, and I've added a couple tidbits, segments in the show to see whether or not they will stick. Kicking off tonight, we're going to go right into ingots, which is our primary discussion topic. And the main thing that I want to cover is a discussion of whether or not victims are partially to blame for exploits of privacy data. Now, I'm a little technology challenged tonight because I'm not hosting.
Yeah. I'll bring it up for them. Yeah.
But everybody should be able to see the CNET article that I've got up now on my camera. And I don't know if Lance can bring that up on the main screen or not.
Yeah, I just brought it up. Yeah, you can turn
Okay,
it
sweet.
up, yeah.
All right. So this article dropped earlier this week in I can't remember exactly where the location was, but South Carolina. South Kakalaki. So there was a teen charged for stealing a nude pic from his teacher's phone. So the way this went down is the teacher left her phone on her desk and then stepped outside the classroom for a moment. A 16-year-old student then went up to her desk, grabbed the phone, and while perusing through it, found a nude photo of hers. I'm not sure exactly whether he propagated the photo or what, but the point was he saw it and oh, that's right. He took a photo of the phone. So it's the photo on the phone, and he's taking a photo of the phone displaying the photo.
Which is enough photoception for you?
Yes, yeah. So what's interesting about this is the fallout of this is that the school determined that the teacher was at fault. And at least or actually asked for her resignation.
Wow.
And I'm sure that she went on immediate suspension. So
that's
right. And in another, and there's a couple references cited in another instance. A teacher in Ohio had nude photos stolen of her, posted to a revenge porn site, and that school suspended her. So I believe this is fairly common now. I think most of the stories that we hear crop up are teachers whose photos are actually out there online. Maybe and not always because they've been compromised. Facebook photos or photos out available on some other site where they just assumed maybe that their students wouldn't be lurking. Or maybe they just don't understand how privacy and internet security works, and their photos were viewed without using an exploit or a compromise, whether that be compromise of physical security or some other. So I wanted to ask your guys' opinion. What's your thoughts? Just initial thoughts before we get into kind of a Q&A on this about the school's reaction.
In my opinion, it is stealing on the student's part, and it is an invasion of privacy and everything. I'm pretty sure the teacher didn't think, oh, the student's gonna go into my phone and take my shit or whatever. I mean, technically, the student didn't really say took anything besides taking a picture of the phone itself and then spread it around, but it is a bit disconcerting that also like adults should always know that when you have kids around, they're going to try to like mess around. They're gonna mess with your devices. No matter what age they are, they may not like you for whatever reason, especially in school, and just try to mess with your stuff. So
or maybe they do. In this case, you never know.
Yeah. And
Yeah, I have a really good friend of mine all the way back from high school, and she teaches junior high biology. And not too terribly long ago, we were hanging out, and I very easily, on a whim, figured out her password on her iPhone.
Wow.
It didn't take but 3 tries. I looked at her and I told her, "You need to put your fingerprint sensor on this now." She goes, "Why?" I said, "Because if I can figure it out in 3 tries, so can your kids." And so, fortunately, since then, she's done that and taken my advice. But it's concerning, one, how easy it is to figure out a 4-digit PIN, especially if you know just a little bit of personal information about somebody. Dates of birth, anniversaries, things like that. Those are pretty easy to figure out because those are common PIN numbers used. But the fact that this feels a little draconian on the school district side, in that they're forcing her to resign and finding her at fault when we talk about things online and things technology, there is an expected level of privacy, and that privacy was broken in this case. And so the fact that the school is basically like, no, you're SOL because it was your fault because you took the pictures that you sent has been like, that feels draconic and old. And if I were that teacher, I would be putting that kid and his family at whatever financial hurt I could, because now her name's plastered all over the internet as someone who's had a picture taken of her that was completely nude or partially nude or whatever, and she's already been fired for it once, and it's going to be harder for her to get a job now. And so I would be all over that kid and his family and the school district like white on rice, trying to do everything I could to get my good name back if I were in her shoes. Yeah. And good on the local authorities for pressing charges on the punk for whatever they're going to do, voyeurism and whatever this quote computer crime is.
And right, that's a good point to bring up. It's not the school that pressed charges on the teen. Initially, their only response was to demand that the teacher resign. It was when the teacher brought the case up to the police that the police actually charged the teen. So there's a few things going on here for me. So there's a bit of irony in that this teacher was teaching a course which was at least partially dedicated to computer programming.
Yeah, the irony is not lost.
So, the CNET article doesn't explicitly call out, but so I don't know if this was a person who just didn't lock her phone, with a PIN or a password, or a swipe motion or something. It makes it sound like the teen just walked up and accessed the phone. Or maybe, like Kyle mentioned, he was just able to figure out the password. This and the reason I brought this article up is because I really did not want to talk about the whole Apple versus FBI case.
Yeah, there's so much more that's blown up since we last spoke that I'm just sit back and wait. We'll see what comes from that. That's a topic for another day again.
Right, but there are things on the periphery which I think are important and that are related to it or at least tangential to it. One of the things is, and I'm sure all of us provide some level of tech support to our friends and family. That of course has to be managed. And one of the things that I bring up in terms of managing it is I tell people, with great computing power comes great responsibility, right? It's, I get frequently frustrated by people who want very powerful devices, but then refuse to take the responsibility that goes along with maintaining them, keeping them up to date, and keeping them secure and private. And I'm like, you can't. I think society feels like because these devices are available for sale, that anyone has a right to wield them. And I'm like, no, that's not the case. I mean, you can, but it's the same as driving a car. We don't require people to be licensed to operate smartphones, but you have to consider the depth and breadth of personal information that you allow to flow across that conduit. And so, here's my thing. You can have a phone and it has a great digital camera, and that's great. You can use it and you can store those photos on your phone. However, there are still cameras, right? DSLRs, point and shoots. If you need to take illicit photos of yourself, maybe you take them on that and keep that at home, not walking around with you, exposed to the public where it could be compromised. That's one possibility. But the bigger thing is, and I connect this kind of to the topic of the fappening, and I always kind of go back to this, the Jennifer Lawrence comments that that people committed a crime against her in grabbing her photos and posting them online, and that anybody who looked at them was also an accessory to that crime. Well, my problem is, and again, it's not a crime per se, but my point is, was Jennifer Lawrence or any of those stars consciously aware of the fact that probably when they were signed into their phone, they probably autonomously followed through the enabling of iCloud? And were they consciously aware of the fact that every photo that they took was automatically being uploaded to an online service? And my point is that, and again, so my question for this segment was, are victims to blame for privacy compromises and exploits of their data? It's not necessarily that they're to blame. However, when you allow something of yours to be exposed and made available for theft, there's a level of prudence that you have not shown. And I struggle a little bit sometimes with the media and even with people who jumped on board bandwagon style when the fappening happened at only expressing like Jennifer Lawrence's trade point, which was that she was a victim and my problem is okay, but you were also given a device that wields power, and you're intelligent enough or cautious enough, really. Stars out in Hollywood should demand that their assistants are. If I realized that my phone were uploading all my most personal photos to an online service, I would probably be looking for my assistant to fire them. And I'm not. I'm saying the same things now. I'm not just blaming celebrities. I say the same things to my wife and people in my family. I'm like, you have to be conscious that it's your responsibility to protect your data, right? So I don't know. Are you guys like strongly opposed to that point of view, or
no?
There comes a point where going back to the fappening, if we're gonna put it in a simple terms, when you go to bed at night, you probably lock your door, right? But there are still people who make their way in, and if you're locking your front door and your back door at night, metaphorically on your phone, some people just, as they say, want to see the world burn. And that's something that you can't. It's hard to say that it's Jennifer Lawrence's fault in that case, or this teacher's fault in this case. Although I do agree, a DSLR takes much better pictures, but that's for another topic for another time. But it's hard. Without knowing the specifics of, like, obviously with the fappening, it was an iCloud hack, and that's something that Apple up until then touted as supposed to being a very secure service, and that's always been Apple's one of their most favorite selling points is how secure their products and their services are. So when iCloud automatically syncs their phones, they probably pay the money for the extra data required, because 5 gigs goes up like that when you're syncing photos, and didn't think twice of it. Hopefully now they do. And so on the one hand, yeah, you got to be a little bit more responsible. But if you're doing the basics, I don't know. I still feel sorry for them.
Yeah, I would say I agree with you, Stamos. I think that one thing I've always said to my friends and family is everybody like to say, "Oh, kids today are so smart." I say, no, they're not. They're not that smart because they're not being taught. They're being taught how to program, being taught robotics and stuff for that. But nobody's being taught ethics when it comes to technology. It's more of, all right, here's this $900 phone. You pretty much have a studio and every other thing else in this device, and go nuts with it. So people become trolls, or people, like you said, want to see the world burn. And there are a lot of people, especially celebrities, I've noticed, and I do work with some people that are like singers and stuff like that, and they're very technologically just like a Luddites. They don't really know. They know their craft when it comes to like maybe singing or their mics or whatever, but when it comes to like their own security and data privacy and stuff like that, they absolutely have no clue of what they're doing. But they will have the latest phone, have the latest computers, and they just click on everything. Click yes, I will take it, and I don't care whatever else happens, you know. And I do think that there should be some sort of education being put out there, not just for kids but also for adults, to help people be cognizant of what is being put out there. Don't take pictures that you don't want to be put out into the world. And you know, it has to start somewhere. Somebody has to. Yeah, I don't know if this is the company's fault. Is it the adult's fault or is the kid's fault? Like, somebody somewhere has to come to a consensus. Like, we need this education for everyone to figure out, so that stuff like this won't always happen, and everybody will have like a clear-cut consequence to the actions as well.
Right, yeah, exactly. And you know, and like I said, I always put this question forth as, you know, well, is it the victim a little bit to blame? That's not what I actually believe. But my point is, and Kyle, you're a father, and I'm a father, and you know, my stance is, you know, if something happens to my daughter as a victim, is she to blame for the crime that was committed on her? No. However, knowing how people are and the things that they will do, it's absolutely part of my daughter's education regimen for me to make her aware of these things, right?
Absolutely.
So my thing is, you know, I mean, it was for me too, you know, as a kid, you know, getting it from my parents. Hey, when you know, hey, you're going to take the car, make sure you lock the doors when you park. Don't think that just because you're walking into a convenience store for 5 minutes, you don't need to lock your doors, right? I mean, things of that nature that to me aren't being conveyed, and people are not taking on as a matter of responsibility for the things that they operate. You can't just go buy a thing, right? You need to be educated, aware, and it's just a streak of a bad pattern of behavior that's being set by the consumer who just walks into the Verizon store, walks into Best Buy, asks a salesperson what kind of phone they should buy, and it's just placed in their hands and they walk out. And you know, I've told the story before of, you know, my sister-in-law who, you know, handed me her phone one holidays that we were all at my in-laws and said, hey, my phone is grotesquely slow. And I'm like, you have 2,000 pictures on it and you have auto sync enabled with Verizon Cloud. I'm like, you know, and you know, there's a certain point where you can't rely on, you know, your neighborhood geek or nerd to educate you about those things as a corrective response, right? People need to get in the mode of being proactive and understanding what these devices do and how they can be compromised. You know, either the device itself or the services that it accesses. And yeah, Kyle, I absolutely agree with you. If you take reasonable precautions and you know, if you take reasonable precautions and you're still violated, absolutely, right? But it's like I used to say when I was a kid in college, like when I can't remember what the thing was, but it was
probably
like
LoJack.
No, it wasn't. It was a physical thing. It was the crossbar that went across your steering wheel.
The club.
Yeah,
The club. Yes, and people were like, "Dude, why do you use the club?" I'm like, "It's not really going to stop anybody." I'm like, "It doesn't have to stop anybody. It just needs to make my car look more difficult to burgle than the guy parked next to me."
Yeah.
You know, so again, you know, is it their fault? You know, no, but you know, if my daughter comes home, you know, sometime in the future from being mugged, and she was walking through a neighborhood of ill repute, you know, down an alley, I'm absolutely going to ask, hey, we've talked about that, and we've said that's, you know, are you a victim? Are you to blame for the crime? No. were you not as smart as you could have been? Absolutely. And I guess that's my problem with the dialogue, is that nobody talks about the fact that the people who were victimized also didn't show a prudent amount of common sense.
50 years ago, it was you had to be careful not to go on the other side of the tracks.
Right.
20 years ago, it was don't talk to strangers. Nowadays, it's be cognizant of what you're doing with your phones and where it's going.
Right.
And I don't think, we've had those discussions, those previous two discussions for a generation and a half, 2 generations now. Those are pretty well baked in at this point. We're now hitting the generation where we have to have that third conversation of be careful what you put on your phone, be careful what you put on the internet. When it goes on the internet, it stays there forever, whether you think you've deleted it or not. And we just haven't come to full saturation of having those conversations. It starts with people like you and I, Stamos, where we have that conversations with our children and with our friends as best as we can. And we hope it trickles down from there. And that's how it will. And hopefully we get to a point in the next 5 to 10 years where there's a little bit more common sense from an online standpoint, but time will tell.
Yep, no doubt. So let's move on to the news. Good conversation, guys, by the way. Excellent discussion. Number one, in the top of the news feed, Oculus CEO comes down hard on Mac support for the Rift. So this was a bit hilarious, and it looks like I dumped the news story, so I'm not going to bring it up on the screen. But basically, the CEO of Oculus, whose last name is Lucky, I think it's Palmer Lucky.
Awesome. Yes.
When queried whether or not there was going to be Mac support for the Oculus Rift, basically said there would be as soon as Apple makes a good computer.
I love it. I love it so much.
and while it came off hilarious, what he really meant was that, or what he was really inferring to, and I'm not sure how many people are clued in, but back I know at least in 2008. Because I had one, the MacBook Pro at least came with a dedicated graphics card, and that was the 1999 model. I think all versions of the MacBook Pro came with dedicated graphics cards, and then scaled up from the $1,999 model. Later, Apple introduced a less expensive unit, or maybe there was one already in the product line at about $1,799. That was a MacBook Pro without a dedicated graphics card. So it had an onboard integrated Intel graphics processor.
That's about the time the Iris Pro came out, isn't it?
I think it was before the Iris Pro.
Maybe even. Yeah.
I think the Iris Pro was the generation where after that, pretty much I think synonymous with Apple going to the unibody construction, that they dumped the dedicated graphics cards in the MacBook Pro line for everything except the very high-end model, which is the $2,799 model, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm not looking at the Apple Store right now, so my prices may be a little off. But the point is that 2008, I went out and bought a MacBook Pro because Windows Vista had just come out at the tail end of 2007. The main problem with Vista was poor support from the GPU manufacturers. Yeah. So I bought a MacBook Pro to boot camp it to take care of my portable gaming solution.
There you go.
So that MacBook Pro has since expired, and I'd love to go back to a MacBook Pro, but the problem is that I'm not going to pay $2,000 for a laptop and not get a dedicated GPU in it. That's just ridiculous. So now you come to the age of VR, and the problem is that the simple fact is, from a graphics processing power standpoint, Apple computers do not have the GPU muscle to shoulder the load of the Oculus Rift or other VR solutions.
And it's interesting because it's not that the Apple, especially the Mac Pro, it's not that they aren't beasts in and of themselves. It's that those things are purpose-built for content creation, for media creation, and that is it. These things are not gaming machines. These things are very highly tuned graphics cards that are built into them. For lack of a better terms, they're render machines.
Yeah.
And so it makes complete sense that we're not going to get VR for these things anytime soon. And until we get some options of maybe some NVIDIA stuff where the lower end NVIDIA stuff is basically
I mean,
workstation grade desktop side stuff.
yeah,
So it'll be fun to see what happens down the line.
because the only computer I can think of from Apple that can possibly even get to that level of like VR capability is their new cylinder looking one, the Mac Pro. Like that thing is a beast when it's fully decked out. But like you said, it is a rendering. They're really good at content creation, and I believe the Mac Pro, the workstation, can have Titan cards, I believe, or something like that. But that's like the workstation version. It's not, the gamer ones that we will buy for PCs and stuff like that. So it's interesting. I believe Apple could do it if they wanted to, but since they already have that niche of with the creatives and stuff like that, I don't see that as a thing happening.
Yeah, and the only thing I didn't care for in the article was, the author kind of took the guy to task for not saying it nicely, and I'm like, I don't know.
How else are you supposed to say it?
Right.
This is the same company that has John Cormack, who he's always spoken his mind about whatever's going on. So,
Right.
I mean, I don't know how you can take him to task for speaking his mind too.
Right. Exactly. So next story I found particularly interesting. So Intel is going to be. There's a rumor, I guess, that Intel is going to be making a number of the LTE modem chips for the iPhone 7, which we all expect to drop this fall, as always, in the September-October timeframe. Now, the reason I found this interesting is Intel has its own play in the mobile space. I'm actually just getting ready to trade in my Asus Zenfone 2, which is powered by an Intel Atom chip as its processor. But the other thing is, what's always interesting with these companies who manufacture parts for the iPhone is there's always trickle down. And so while they are busily pumping out, proprietary designs for Apple, they're always able to then leverage either those lessons learned or direct kind of subcomponents of those assemblies for their own use. And so my example is, LG, right, which makes a lot of the screens for the iPhone, makes Android phones with great displays, right? They're not necessarily able to utilize the exact display that they use for the iPhone, but they're able to leverage what they've learned. And LG obviously also makes great IPS displays for other things like computer monitors and LED screens. So what I'm excited about is if Intel gets in this game and produces good modems for Apple, I expect them to be able to leverage that and then be able to say, do package deals for their Atom processor for use in mobile alongside an LTE modem at a cost-effective price that could be utilized by Windows Phone, but could also be utilized in Android phones. So you guys have any thoughts on this news story?
The continuing death of AMD is right here in front of us. Intel's able to diversify even more, and AMD just goodbye. I mean, that's all. That's really all that comes to mind when I see this. And it didn't the recent Sony phone, the Xperia 2. Is that no? You had the Asus Zenfone. Didn't the Xperia 2 have the Intel chip in it as well?
No. So I had the Xperia Z3V, and that one was powered by a Qualcomm chip, a Snapdragon.
Okay.
It was one of the early Snapdragon 810. Yep. So next news story is Windows 10 gains ground, approaches 13% market share. So I never know how to feel about these news stories. Like, should I care? Should I be impressed? I guess what the good news story is that Windows 10 has had a positive reception. It's on the uptake. It's not necessarily driving more sales of PCs, but it's definitely allowing people an upgrade path on their current hardware. And I'm sure it's still fueling PC sales, maybe just not to a point that it's actually allowing the market to recover. But analysts keep talking about that, and my thought is, I don't know that the market's ever going to. I mean, when we say recover to what? Like the heyday of the desktop PC or even the laptop? I mean, we've blown through that. So
Yeah, we have. Although I feel like we're kind of coming back to the laptop in the Ultrabooks. The Ultrabooks seem to be making a big, strong push nowadays. And the other thing that really this kind of the significant piece about this story, in my opinion, is that Microsoft doesn't want to be a single product company anymore with, Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 7, so on and so forth, Office 2010, Office 2013, Office. They want to become Windows as a service. And that's been their plan for the last several years. Windows 8 and 8.1 was the first attempt at getting that way. Them releasing Windows 10 in this fashion is the next significant step in getting that way. And it won't be long before it's just Windows or Office. And it's just a step in the right direction from what Microsoft's trying to do. And for that, I applaud them.
Yeah. I'm not. Yeah, like I think I'm in the same camp as Stamos. I don't really know how to feel about how. Yeah, I was like, okay, they're coming back. Sure, that's awesome. Yeah, and good on you, Microsoft. You're making money. Awesome. And that's really all I ever really feel about it. Really, quite honestly, it's just like, I don't know. Half of the time when these companies put out these like reports and how well or bad they're doing and stuff like that, when you're that big of a company, it's really hard for them to turn and pivot and do many things. They're not very versatile as a smaller company, but they're going to have ups and downs. And I just feel like that's just the ebbs and flows of how this works. And like any everything else, you got to keep moving forward. You got to try to innovate and, try to capture people's imagination and have them come to get your product. And I would say definitely the same thing with Windows 10, how people felt about Windows 8. Definitely a big divide. It's like, I'm going to get it or not. Maybe I'll come back to it. Who knows? Or maybe they just buy a new computer and then they just have it and they don't care anymore. But we'll see.
All right. Next story up, counter to that vein, is founder of Epic Games took a swipe at Microsoft as they were basking in the glow of their 13% uptake of Windows 10 upgrades, and criticizes him for the universal Windows platform. So, what Tim Sweeney is complaining about is the fact that if you develop your game or port your game into the UWP framework, then you have to. That game can only be sold through the Windows Store. You can't put it up on Steam. You can't sell it yourself. And I always get a little bothered by this. Maybe I have a bad taste in my mouth because this is
it's Windows Live all over.
A little, but it harkens to me more so to Gabe Newell's, the concern he raised about, Windows is attempting to become a walled garden, the same as Apple.
Oh God! Stop chasing that company, damn it!
But,
I know.
But my thing is I always have concern for companies who take a swipe at the way another company is doing something, So here's my thing, Epic, is it's Microsoft's technology. They've offered the platform. There are constraints that go along with it. Now, one of the great things that comes out of Microsoft taking this approach is that it creates platforms that are standardized. They are common. You can work within that ecosystem and be a consumer of that ecosystem and have a certain set of expectations. To me, this goes back to the stark difference between the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. People complained about the Xbox 360 and it having its requirements and its constraints. But the difference is that when you went and played on their online platform, there were certain things you expected. Menus in the lobby systems had certain requirements. It wasn't like the PS3, which was the Wild West, where literally every game that you went into to play multiplayer was an entirely different experience. Frequently would take you 30 minutes to an hour to figure out how to connect with your friends and play online. Whereas an Xbox 360 game, pretty much you threw the disc in and you could be online within a matter of minutes. There are good things that come out of UWP. Microsoft is trying to build something. They're trying to build, compatibility across, all of their devices and make a true, code once deploy everywhere environment. And this is what it takes. And sure, they're gonna leverage some business aspects into it to try and drive people to utilize and consume that framework. But my feeling is, Google's not a public library. They're a for-profit company. Their search engine isn't public domain. So I have the same problem with, nations who try and, levy legal restrictions on Google, treating their technology as if it's a public service. And I'm like, they're a company. Sure, if I'm a company and I build a search engine, maybe I want to favor my own results of that search, right? It's my company.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right? That's kind of the way I feel about this Microsoft piece. What are your guys' thoughts on it?
I agree to an extent that when you it is, even as it's a publicly traded company, so they have to be, I guess everybody else has a reason to have them beholden to certain standards and operations and what they're doing. But it also shows that this type of move is definitely me too sort of thing, and where everybody just wants their own standard and no one wants to actually adopt a universal standard as how to we're going to get our games. The funny part about that is, it's like, especially as a PC user, I'm probably never going to use that particular marketplace to buy a game from them, because I have like 3 or 4 others where I can go and buy it, because I'm not walled in. It's not stopping me from doing anything. And I think the only game I ever bought from Windows Live back in the day was like Lost Planet 2, and that had.
Hey guys, I'm sorry, I got to interrupt. I got to drop from the call. Can one of you guys wrap things up and take us out? So I apologize for that. I just had something that's come up.
All right, no problem.
Yep.
No problem.
All right, thanks a lot.
So we'll continue the fight. No. But yeah, like it's I think I lost my train of thought. Yes, the last game that I bought for them was Lost Planet 2, and it had all sorts of weird issues with just. At first, it gave me a hard drive error, then it was corrupted, and then it was a VSync problem, and then and then like even trying to connect to my friends online was atrocious versus how it was on Xbox. And so the taste in my mouth that I got from them from the first experience I've had with them, it's not good. So I don't see myself going back to this at all. And
there's no incentive to develop for it. It's not going to be as good in the near future as Apple's ecosystem. And it's left a bad taste in gamers' mouths from the previous attempt to do something like this. I don't see any way that this is going to work. I mean, it's been Gears of War was the first game released for it, the first game of note released for it. And there were performance issues out the wazoo on AMD Fury X cards, when there should be no performance issues on that card with this game.
Yeah.
This is a game that was essentially ported from the Xbox One. So it's not even like the hardware available to try to write the code for was a higher quality hardware set than what they had available on the PC side. And so it's a mess. It's going to be a mess. I don't think Microsoft will do it well. Not in the near time. And if they really want to focus on getting it right, they should focus on the interaction between Windows 10 machines and Xbox Live on the Xbox One right now.
Right.
And if they can get that right, maybe they'll have a chance at getting it right for the rest of the store. Maybe.
And it's not like they don't have because if you have Windows 10, there's the Xbox app that you can download. It's free, and it allows you to stream your games from your Xbox One to your PC. I don't think a lot of people know that, but you can also take that same stream and then stream it out on Twitch if you want with your little overlays and everything. I feel like that's the direction you should keep going with. Like, here's this Xbox just keep it. Just say Xbox, and it's just but it's Xbox or PC, and just keep it there. Keep it in that. If you want to be a wall garden, fine, but keep it in the Xbox wall garden. Something that's already working. Have that team figure out a PC version of that, and
which most games for Xbox are going to be on PC anyway, so
much, yeah.
It should be pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Give me Halo on PC. That would make my day.
Hell yeah. It'll make my day. It'll be
like if I would be willing to bet that if Microsoft had put Halo on PC when they did the remastered edition, 1 through 4 at that point, and released Halo 5 for PC too. I feel like, and I don't know if this is actually true. I feel like they would have doubled their sales, because maybe not double, but at least they would have added a significant number to their sales had they done that.
Yeah.
What can you do?
We can only wait and see, right? See
that's the truth.
What this new initiative is of theirs.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. All right. Well, folks, sorry that we have to cut the stream short. Like I said, Ecclesiastes had to drop out for a second there. But definitely, I guess episode 3 is tentative. We don't know when it's gonna come out. We'll see. But it's something that we're trying to do weekly, right?
When it happens.
Yeah, when it happens.
Yep.
This is the Forge. When we get our stuff in, we'll talk about it and stuff like that. It is,
Yep.
Hardware is a hard thing to do sometimes. So, but we appreciate you guys for listening and watching the stream. Definitely check us out at the gww.com. You can find all of our podcasts on SoundCloud, Stitcher, and iTunes as well. Definitely show us